Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here. This is the Catalyst Weekly Astrology Report. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go over, the astrology of the weekend. It is New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2021. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out, 2021, as we go into the next phase. So, with astrology, I don't really give a lot of weight necessarily to the calendar changeover and those types of ways of tracking time, but it is important because we're all focusing on it. So regardless if it is cosmologically or even just naturally part of the cycle, it's still something that the entire world, for the most part, certainly the Western world, is focusing on in terms of the changeover into a whole new cycle. And I think it's really great, actually, and very timely that we have a new moon right on the 2nd of January, because the first new moon of Capricorn season really does feel like the beginning, right? The sun comes into Capricorn at the solstice, and it marks a transition moment. And it's really that first new moon in Capricorn that begins the process of our own personal development, where we want to set our intentions for and within. And I think it's really great that it's so close to the actual calendar new year, because I think we have a lot of hopes for 2022. 2021, I think for many people did not pan out the way that it was anticipated. For many of us, especially if you're here on this channel, you knew what 2021 was going to be. And we are so close to the lunar nodes shifting out of Gemini and Sagittarius that we really are about to transition into a whole new phase of being, of our karmic journey at a soul level, and to leave behind a lot of what, how we have been operating up until this point. So there is a lot of change actually in the cosmos that is reflecting the calendar change that happens every time around this year. So welcome back, everyone, to my subscribers and my regular viewing audience. Thank you for being here. And if you're new here, if this is your first time checking this out, welcome. It's great to have you here. I appreciate you taking the time to check this content out. So get out of the studio mode here. So I hope everyone is doing well. Had the opportunity to take some time off, some extra time off this weekend, if that's something that you're you have the capacity to do. I'm going to be honest, I am exhausted. I am so tired, and I thought to myself, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about on this report. Obviously, we'll go through the astrology like we always do, and I just have confidence that I can just be authentically myself in the moment, and that will be enough. And I think that's a really important message that we all maybe need to hear as we are about to embark on so many new cycles, especially with a new moon that is of the symbolic representation of the simultaneous experience of demolition and destruction and death that is the precursor to rebirth. And fire represents that mystery and that enigma all wrapped into one elemental experience. So we're, like I said, simultaneously moving into a new phase by also letting go of the old phases that we've been in. And I think the best thing that we can ask for and the best thing that we can do, quite honestly, is just to be ourselves, to be authentic, to not try to shove ourselves into any box of identity or how we should or shouldn't feel. Because one of the primary aspects of Taurus, which is where the North Node is going to be shifting into very soon, and the Pleiadian nature, if we're going to get into starseed qualities here, is to be in communion with what is unadulterated, pure, and natural. And I think that a lot of times as humans, we tend to put ourselves into these ridiculous, I don't want to say ridiculous, it's good to have high standards for ourselves. That's a very Virgo trait. But Taurus is about what is and the inherent value of what is. And if it exists in a natural form, then it has value. And I get the sense that especially considering the fact that we are moving into a very intense mode over the next year and a half that's going to be about resources, about value, about worth, about meaning, and how it is derived versus naturally and in communion with each other. This is something that's going to be a big theme, and it's going to play itself out in many different ways. And I just think that it is very important that we're giving ourselves the space to be authentic and to be ourselves and to find inherent value in who we are in any given moment, even along with all of our human flaws. Even when we're expressing aspects about ourselves that maybe we would find, that we would have some sort of adverse reaction if other people were doing it, right? This also allows ourselves to be more compassionate for other people's experiences when we can be compassionate towards our own as well. And I think that we're doing the best that we can. All of us are doing the best that we can. And for as much as Saturn, as a symbolic representation, gets a lot of flack in certain circles or has like this really strong stigma attached to what it represents, the other side of it is the security and the confidence and the authority and the unyielding, uncompromising nature of nature and of time itself, that we can rely on that. And soon Saturn is going to change into the next degree over the weekend, actually. So as we come into the new calendar year, we come into a Capricorn new moon, which really does signal the beginning of a new season and our own growth within it. But it's also, Saturn's going to move into the next degree of Aquarius, which is going to take us into much more of a anticipatory frame of mind or just existence, right? Our ability to be a barometer or to see the writing on the wall. This is a big theme that's coming through very strongly this morning as I was preparing, is having the capacity to see the signature within everything that surrounds us and being able to read between the lines, to be able to see under the surface, which is the nature of the occult energy. And it's not evil or bad in and of itself. It's just hidden. And why it's hidden is something that I think we all need to come to understand at some point, and I think we will. And maybe it's hidden not because there's anything inherently that needs to be hidden, but just because it's not something that's obvious to our five senses. And that is a very Taurus thing, by the way. Our five senses, maybe a sixth sense. We are talking about the sensibility to the world around us and the inherent value and worth of everything that is part of the objective reality that we're part of. So, but Saturn is still in this position right now that is unyielding, uncompromising, is a backbone in some ways that we are all going to the same place together. And how we get there is a function of our own personal karmic journey, our soul's evolution, and the choices that we each individually make. And to be judgmental, which is very easy to do with Sagittarius. We have Mars in Sagittarius still. We have the moon now in Sagittarius. Asteroid Vesta is getting very close to the galactic center in Sagittarius. So it's not difficult to get into this righteous frame of mind about the value systems that we're operating under with so much Sag energy. But as everything continues to slip into Capricorn and to Aquarius and Jupiter, even with going into, it's really now about the collective as a whole, and our participation is directly impacting all of that, including how we treat ourselves, right? And what we think about ourselves and what kind of expectations we put on ourselves. All of this is kind of falling away, isn't it? We've known this since January 2020, right? The changing of the guard, right? The beginning of the end, right? Saturn meets Pluto, and the destruction finally finds some sort of, again, it's uncompromising, unyielding, and the sands of time are nothing that we can actually impact in this material third dimensional reality. That's not to say that outside of that, time has a completely different meaning and shape, because it does, but we still live here, and there's a reason that we are still here if we are still here. And part of that, I believe, my own personal belief, is that our job is to not only cross the threshold into a new evolution of human consciousness, but also to really learn finally what it means to be a spiritual being having a material experience. I think that humanity has really struggled with this many times over. So we'll channel the astrology for the weekend. We'll go through the major transits of the week leading up to the first quarter square, which actually is going to be next Sunday. So we'll have some time to go back over the weekend's astrology and really get deeper into it by next weekend. But just to kind of see how the new year of 2022 is going to be ushered in astrologically and cosmologically. So I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to clear the bots out of my chat as usual. This is a whole new thing for me. For those of you who have offered reviews, thank you so much. I'm starting the process of your free readings right now. And so if I haven't reached out to you, just be patient. It's coming, and I will make some plans about what kind of reading. So, and if you're interested in that gift exchange, you can go to social media. Of course, that's in the description box below, the links to Facebook and Telegram, and give you all the information about how to cash in or to participate, I guess, in the gift exchange. And you can also go to the website, hit the testimonials tab, and you can see what everybody is saying about the work we're doing together, because it's very potent, and I feel very blessed and honored to be able to guide people along their own journey as I am being guided by them on my journey. So it is a reciprocal and symbiotic relationship. And a catalyst is some type of substance that initiates or gives the energy for a chemical reaction that, in its role as a initiator, does not lose its own energy, right? It's not that it doesn't give it away to the chemical reaction and then lose itself. A catalyst will maintain its energetic integrity and at the same time be able to stimulate chemical reactions. And so you think about that as like a chain reaction of people. And that's really what this whole thing is about. So that's enough of the ramble, I suppose. So I hope everyone is doing very well. We'll get right into the astrology, because I know that's what you're here for, is the astrology. So I'm actually going to move myself over here. There's no intuitive reading for today. We don't usually do that on the weekly astrology report. That's something that we save for the transmissions, the daily transmissions. So also, too, if you have not had the opportunity to check out your sign's horoscope for the new moon, you can do that. That's already posted. I posted them last week. It looked at the last weekend, because that was just incredibly astounding astrology, and then through the week up to this new moon, so you can get an idea of the areas of your life and your sign, so your rising sign, moon sign, sun sign. Those are all posted either on YouTube or BitChute. All you have to do is just scroll through and you'll find your sign, and you can get a little bit more detailed information about the areas of life that you can expect this upcoming new moon to have an impact on. So let's get right into today's astrology. So it is the 31st of December, 2021. So the new moon is going to be on the 2nd, and when we get there, we'll get into so much more detail about it. But, you know, suffice it to say, letting it burn. I mean, there's just so much. And what I have thought very interestingly about Jupiter in Pisces is I had anticipate it being kind of like a sigh of relief, and in some ways it has, but it's been such a powerful transition and has been so incredibly dissolving and expansive in a space that knows no boundaries, knows no time, knows no limits or borders, if you will. Everything is everything else, right? In Pisces, that's the idea of returning back to source, that it is so much bigger than I even could have imagined in terms of Jupiter in Pisces, right? Is the inner truth and the true inner vision that Jupiter in Pisces represents, right? And the spiritual expansion that it possibly could give us is very confusing, and everything is kind of being thrown out on the table now, right? It is just coming from all angles, in terms of information. It's conflicting, it is confusing, it's bewildering. And that's kind of the thing about Jupiter. It's just like, guess what? It's just going to keep expanding, 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 because there's nothing but this realm that we are in, and everything that can be offered up as some sort of truth or vision is going to be, and this is part of the mastery of this realm, I feel like. And so if you are a Jupiter ruled person like I am, then in some ways it has been incredibly expansive, of course, with Jupiter in Pisces, but it also does not there's nothing to hang on to now, right? It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the challenge with this is, are you able to handle how big it's getting? It's one thing with Neptune in Pisces, where it's just like dissolving everything it touches, and so that there is no difference between you and everything else. But now that Jupiter's here, it's like a balloon expanding, or the container itself, where, you know, the whole field is just getting bigger and vaster and wider and more confusing. That this is the real challenge here, like the real Hierophant, or the true high priest that Jupiter in Pisces represents, has to be able to manage this space. And you know how Jupiter is. If you're in his good graces, then you'll get everything that you need. But if he's pissed at you, or you are not aligned with the values that Jupiter seems to represent, then you're on your own. You are on your own. And you can be subjected to any number of false doctrines or spiritual platitudes or anything else. And I find it really interesting right now, actually, that there is more conversation, there's more focus paid right now on people pointing out false light, which I think is interesting in and of itself. Not to say that that isn't a true statement, or that's not something to be aware of, but you can see it now, everybody pointing fingers at everybody else, going, beware, beware, beware. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, you know, yes, beware, but then you're like, well, who the hell do I trust or listen to? Well, you listen to yourself. That's all there is to it. And Jupiter is going to be very favorable for those who are able to manage this space and have direct connection to God and to Source and the Great Spirit, because everything else is just propaganda, as far as I can tell at this point. So it's been an interesting it's been an interesting transition, right? Jupiter is, you know, it gets there's a lot of positivity, and the advocacy of Jupiter and the representation. Jupiter is a lawyer, right? Jupiter is management, right? Jupiter knows how to, you know, manage the big picture. And in Pisces, it is nothing but the big picture. It is the canvas that the big picture is painted onto. So it's very confusing, and I think that, oh boy, I could just talk all day about that. So let's get into the astrology, though. Let's just get right into it, and let's see what's going on for today and this weekend, right? And I'm sure people are just going to be, you know, sleeping in, doing whatever, you know, taking some time for themselves. Please do that. I hope that you do. And this is not new information, but the cool thing about the way that I read astrology, at least, is that because we live in a dynamic system and a dynamic world, and it's changing all of the time as a result of our own input, then my read of the astrology changes as well based on the input, which I really like. It's not necessarily a static experience. So here we are on the 31st. So the moon is still in Sagittarius. So one of the first things that happened earlier this morning, if we go back, is that the moon is now in conjunction with Antares, right? The heart of the Scorpion, and Archangel Uriel, right? Fire, 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 fire. There's just so much fire. now a lot of stuff is in Capricorn, but even the Capricorn new moon is referencing fire. So again, we want to almost entice this energy into our lives, even though it's not going to be easy. So the first real transit with the Sagittarian moon was to Chiron in Aries. So here's a fire trine right here, first thing this morning. And the Antarian starseed aspect here that we would draw attention to, and Archangel Uriel, right? Ultimately, it is for the good of those involved, right? I mean, if you want to widen it to the good of humanity, it is for the good of humanity, where Antares is, Archangel Uriel, right? The destructive element that is fire represents, especially when we're talking about the fire of God, Archangel Uriel, right? Because this was massive destruction of places that were inhabited by people who were not righteous people, right? And it needed to be, this is the disasters that were brought forward, intentionally or as not stopped. They may have been natural and just not stopped or mitigated in any way to protect anybody. But ultimately, the idea is that it's for the great, it's for the purification. It's to purify in order to be reborn. This is the fire of God and Archangel Uriel, what this symbol represents. And even in Antares, right, you're talking about the heart of the scorpion. So and Antarian starseeds. I mean, it's very, I wouldn't call it maternal, but it is very matriarchal. There's a very strong feminine component of wanting to help and wanting to be humanitarian. There is a strong humanitarian element to the Scorpio archetype, strangely enough. I know it's kind of hard to maybe imagine it until you realize that, communion and cooperation and giving ourselves up and over to something bigger than ourselves is also part of the Scorpio archetype. And this is where power comes from. You cannot have your power taken. You can only give it. And that's where it happens, is in the 8th house in Scorpio. So there's something that power that we give over has the ability to really to heal and to assist other people and lift them up and to support others and to empower others as well. And so as much as it seems very destructive and very sharp and painful with all of these particular aspects combining together, Antares, the fire of God, the heart of Scorpio, and even Antarian starseeds, which are not often here in physical form. It's a very difficult, I think, experience for an Antarian starseed to come into physical form. And so they tend to get right to the point about things because their goal and their mission is to be of service and to really assist humanity as a whole through this process. So, but again, right to the point, not wasting any time, and it's painful potentially, it stings potentially, and if you are not able to see the bigger purification aspect of the fire and what it means, and you haven't gotten tipped off by Archangel Uriel, who tipped people off based on their ability to handle the information, then yeah, you're going to get burned and you're not going to understand why you're going to get burned. And that's also part of people's evolutionary journey. There's nothing we can do about that. We don't want to get in the way. But the Scorpio element and even the Sagittarian element where the moon is right now is also, there's a lot of meaning, there's a lot of righteousness, there is a lot of optimism, there is a lot of let's come together and actually do this thing, whatever it is. And sometimes this can go sideways in a way it's actually working against other people. But anyway, I digress. Not really, because it's all relevant. But the first thing we're looking at here is the moon in conjunction with Antares, right? That is in this trine to Chiron. Chiron that is now direct, Chiron at 9 degrees Aries, right? Being able to focus our attention and concentrate it on the full potential of what we could be, the big picture. We look into the crystal ball and we see the full picture of what could be, and we concentrate there rather than Chiron taking us off that concentration into all of these old identities that are not even relevant to us anymore, but they are so powerful, and we think that they are us, right? That we are a victim, that should be ashamed of ourselves, that we have guilt about who we are. These are all imposed identities that reinforce the victim savior narrative, the wounded healer narrative, because that's what Chiron is. And so we're all living through this. Every single person is living through this because this is the current experience of Chiron. So this trine, this fire trine with the moon and Antares is, again, it's going to burn, right? I mean, you have a fire trine involved with the moon too. So it's definitely going to be a burny feeling, right? It's going to be a stinging feeling. It might be subconscious. It might be internalized. It might be very subtle. It might be something that you never say out loud. You just feel it in your actual self. But the trine here is if we can, in fact, keep our attention on who we truly are and can become, this is a potent moment, right? And it definitely was, it felt like this morning. I can vouch for that. And this actually, just to give you a little like astrology lesson, this makes a grand fire trine with my natal Jupiter, speaking of Jupiter, over here in Leo, right? Same, which makes me an Antarian, it makes me an Antarian starseed, right? My ruling planet is in trine to Antares. So, it did feel like that, but the trine is like, you don't even have to do anything about it. And so the downside to a trine, well, there's a couple downsides, but one of them is that there's not much you can do to transmute or change anything or like even lean into any friction. It's so perfectly aligned and balanced in a trine that you can't really break it very easily. And so sometimes when you have a very troubling or intense aspects coming together in a trine, there's nothing you can do. You just have to like sit with it and see how it feels. Kind of like a square, but it's but they are at cross purposes. These are very much aligned in the same element, in the same degree, right? That are and you have your feelings, and then you have your wounded inner child. So I felt this a lot this morning. It was very intense. So if you were also feeling it, this is a big part of it, right? Kind of feeling sorry for ourselves, but also realizing that we're seeing things very clearly. Maybe the sting is substantial within ourselves, but there was something very powerful about this today. And you're going to see like the moon is going to meet Mars at the degree of the solar eclipse, right? Not only is the moon returning back to the point of the total solar eclipse that was on the 4th of December, it's going to be in conjunction with Mars while it's happening. So then we find ourselves potentially really acting on something. So we have to be mindful about what we feel, what it's bringing up, what it's triggering, what kind of feelings are wanting to flare out of us perhaps, and the meaning of it all. And then meeting Mars, the moon and Mars meeting like that. I mean, this is where we get a real flashpoint to our emotions, and it has a lot to do with things that need to come up and be cleared away so that we can move on to the next cycle unimpeded with a clear conscience. So you may find, again, very potentially just like a flare of emotions or a flashpoint. I'm getting a real strong flashpoint type of experience when these two come together. And when will that be? That's a very good question. So let's look at that, actually. It's going to be, there's going to be other aspects that happen before this. So let's look at it. Well, the first one is that the moon then comes into a quincunx, or in conjunct with Uranus at 11 degrees of Sagittarius. So, the world is the laboratory of the soul, right? The meaning of it all, right? The symbols, the abstractions, the archetypes, right? The collective value system, the paradigms that allow for understanding. Like when we understand something, this is the laboratory of our own soul. This is where we grow or change or become somehow better than we were. But the thing is that it's the world as a human construct. The meaning that we give to the world is very much a Sagittarian element. So this is the moon feeling, feeling the experience of this in an internalized and emotional way, maybe even an urge in some ways. But here's the quincunx to Uranus. Uranus and Taurus. Taurus representing the objective reality that we are embedded in, and its inherent value, its worth, right? Taurus is fertility of the ground. This is not something that we impose upon it. It is valuable in and of itself. It is valuable because it's here, that it was created by the creator, right? It is in its own self, right? Its pure unadulterated self. The land, the soil, the fertility of life is all inherently worthy. And this particular degree of Uranus represents, we'll take Uranus out of it for just a second, and we just look at a woman watering flowers in her garden. It's the idea that we as the individual being, which is Aries, right? The subjective persona, has the potential to actually cultivate and care for what will be our consciousness that comes from the seed coming into the soil, which ultimately is Gemini, or the third house, if you're looking at an individual growth process. And this is, the North Node is still in the very, very early parts of Gemini still. So we are still moving in, being pulled in this direction that has to do with the first, bud of consciousness, that seedling that finally pops out of the soil. But we are kind of regressing. That's the thing about the nodes. They move in this seemingly backwards. It's not them that move at all, because the nodes aren't even an object. It's just a position. It's relative to us and where we're going through the solar system that makes, that determines the position of the lunar nodes. But we have the capacity to cultivate and to care for and to water the garden of our mind, right? To be an active participant in the process of reinforcing and, caring for what is naturally there for us to grow within, right? And so Uranus, being Uranus, is, consistently turning these aspects sideways. So depending on where Taurus is in your chart, for instance, if you are a Taurus rising, well, this is happening in your very persona, in your personality, in the subjective experience of I am. And I've talked about this already, that Taurus people are our future, right? Because who they are as people is, in the next 18 months, is going to be where we're all driven at a soul level to, in order to grow. And it's the Taurus people that will embody that the most within just who they are. And so Uranus, there's a lot of crisis around who you are as a person in these particular Taurus aspects. For instance, the Taurus person, that there is upheaval. There's the landscape is always shifting, right? Your identity and your persona and how you see yourself and how you present yourself to the world, Taurus, for instance, is changing. So Uranus, its function is to take us out of ourselves, so that we realize that there is more than just the material aspect of reality. This is the function of Uranus. It's the awakener. It's the higher octave of Mercury. It's the collective third eye. And it's very much a trickster, because it's usually when things go sideways and we're pissed off about it, or we didn't expect it, right? Or that it seems at first that it's, making us really uncomfortable. And in Taurus, that's what a Taurus wants, is to be comfortable. Taurus is about embedding yourself in the soil, that there's nothing but comfort there. This is a consistent upheaval in this realm. And so it is kind of the upheaval and the quick, rapid transitions that Uranus represents that is challenging us to actually take responsibility for cultivating the medium of our growth and caring for it, and cultivating our own consciousness, growing by caring for the medium of our growth. And maybe we are innovating in this realm. Perhaps we are thinking outside of the box about what the inherent worth truly is. These are all different ways that Uranus functions, but it's usually something you can't anticipate and will turn on you on a dime. So when you are, or we we are feeling this sense of the meaning of the world is the laboratory of our soul, you can see how these things are not going to fit together, because the real energy, the really disruptive energy, and certainly the most obvious thing that's happening is Uranus consistently shifting the landscape of value and worth and physicality and reality. So it's not to say that one or the other is where we should be focusing. It's the fact that they don't seem to fit that we have to adjust ourselves in that moment. So this is happening probably right this moment. If we go forward just a little bit, right? This is 10 degrees, 57 minutes. As of noon, it's just past this point into 11 to 12 degrees. So right now at 11:11, now that I'm looking at my clock, this is, this moment of like where, I feel the real meaning of things is and the meaning that we all ascribe to reality here and what we're all here to do is where my soul is growing and learning. But Uranus is like, well, we're actually all waking up by being able to manage the physical world around us. And this is, it's keep in mind again that this is the eclipse. This is Sagittarius is where Ketu, the South Node, has been, right? We are moving into a realm where Taurus is going to be the direction of our soul's evolution. So just keep that in mind when you are making these adjustments about what it is that how do you feel? And what is the agent of your actual true awakening? Because the meaning of things is where we've been, right? The meaning that's already been attributed to our society is a realm that we've already been through. And this eclipse that is in Sagittarius about the widow's past brought to light, like so much of what we're experiencing now and will continue to experience and have been experiencing over the last year and a half is about that meaning, like starting to finish, it's finishing its cycle now. And so when you're feeling, this is like one of those last moments here with the moon of like, yes, this whole experience is where my soul has really grown, or at least feeling that way in this moment. And it's just disorienting, and Uranus in itself is disorienting, and then the quincunx on top of it is disorienting, because you're talking about the difference between what humanity creates in terms of meaning and what is just inherently valuable because it's part of the natural world. These are themes we really are going to have to consider if we haven't already, because it is going to matter moving forward, especially when we have to deal with the meaning that has been here coming to the surface and needing to clear away all of the garbage. So perhaps this is part of that quincunx, is this opportunity to acknowledge these things. Once the moon moves past this point, though, it's going to come into, you can see here, is going to come into a sextile with Saturn, 11 to 12 degrees Aquarius, right? We're all going up the escalator to the black hole. Remember, I talked about this before, and I can't get the image out of my mind because it would always make me freak out as a kid. I don't understand it, but The Price is Right back in the day, how it would have the little mountain climber guy would yodel and it would go up and then it would fall off, and there was something about that it just freaked me out as a kid. I have no idea why. I did, maybe one day I'll do a regression that will explain that. I have no idea, but it's the same image now that I'm getting with Saturn in Aquarius, right? We're all on this escalator together, but it's not just one mountain climber. It's all of us together. And we're all going over the edge together. And when that happens, how we feel when that happens is all based on our own sovereign, authentic nature, which is over here in Leo. So Saturn is just being very unyielding about this. And it's just like, this is just what it is. This is the context of everybody. And we're all equal in the eyes of God, but we all have our own individual journey. And that is that makes up the energy of the human collective based on where everybody is. But there's no changing that, right? It's just going forward or just going up the escalator in our own way. So when the moon is in this sextile today in Sagittarius, again, this is we can adjust ourselves in this moment, right? We may not be able, we can still move up and down the escalator. That's absolutely a possibility. And other people can as well. And we can assist people, and we can see that other people are in different locations and still honor them and love them, even if we're not in the same place. But we have this feeling of adjustment in this moment here to bring our most noble ideals to actual life. That's the thing about Sagittarius again. It's righteous, it's noble, it's successful, it's genuine, it's honest, it's optimistic. It's all the big picture and the understanding of everything that then gives us the meaning of all of our actions. So we may be feeling a strong pull to bring these ideals to actual life. It's not just an abstraction on a page now, or in even our own feelings. We want to bring them into the real world. We want to successfully establish ourselves through genuine, authentic expression, right? And when we do that, I feel like that that sextile to Saturn, it's Saturn that is providing this scaffolding, or this very strong, support, or fortress, or security, or authority and confidence in some ways, that we can bring our noblest ideals to life and really establish ourselves through authentic expression, because Saturn is just holding it down in terms of it's not going to change necessarily anything in terms of our relationship with, the Great Spirit or Source, or even to each other. But what it does do is provide like I said, the backbone and the scaffolding we can invest that into our own feelings to establish ourselves through genuine self-expression, to adjust ourselves into from an ideal to an actual action. And maybe that's just a feeling, right? Maybe it's just a shift in our feeling and in our internal landscape, as opposed to anything necessarily outside of us, right? With the moon in Sag, we're really building a lot of strength as a result of it. And so the strength builds, and we have Saturn that in Aquarius that's kind of holding it down, right? And allows us to move forward and harmonize with that as a result of, we have to actually act on it. That's the thing about a sextile. A trine, you don't have to do anything. And that is just going to provide a foundation and a really strong base. A sextile requires that you act as some sort of magi, right? Or as some sort of participant. So I do see that as the day goes on, this really difficult energy does kind of turn around, or certainly give us something to, tether ourselves to. Now, and then from there is when the moon then meets Mars. And so right after that sextile, I feel like if we have successfully managed to adjust ourselves internally in that moment and find some security in the fact that we are all going through this together, then when the moon does meet Mars, and there may be a flashpoint emotionally, we'll be prepared for it to come up to the surface, right? Again, this is the degree of the total solar eclipse. So we're still going to be going through this revelation, or this past being brought to light. And remember, this is the exact ascendant or rising sign degree of the United States. So this is very much linked to the US as a country as well, what this represents. And so there's just going to be this flashpoint moment that's either a very strong and confident and brave, a brave ability to face our own past and face our fears about it coming to the surface, or the past of, the United States, if you live in the United States and the country that it is. Mars is the agent of our own subjective experience and acts on our will. And so meeting the moon at this point, I think that it could certainly go both ways. It just depends on how we've been interfacing with the energy so far. But I do feel like it'll still be a very strong emotional experience. And like I said, it could be a flashpoint, but it might be exactly the flashpoint that we need to like break something loose so it can come out into the, into the light, right? And needs to be seen, and have the courage to see it and not to slink away or back away or bypass it or whatever. It's going to be very, I think, very important. And that's really, by the end of this is the last major transit for the day. So as we go through the rest of the 31st, at least on East Coast time, we're going to have connection to. It's not really going to make any other like major connections today with anything else until we start to then pass over into that last decan of, everything, which is Venus and Pluto and Mercury and even Neptune. So by tomorrow, or by 2022, or the earliest experiences of 2022 with the moon coming through the last decan of Sagittarius, then it's going to start making what they call, it's called a semi-sextile. It's a 30-degree angle because it's the sign right next to it. And so it'll be making all these semi-sextiles to Venus and Pluto and even Mercury. And a 30-degree angle it's like half a sextile. It is harmonious, but it's very subtle. And some piece of it is not very obvious, right? You don't have the full you don't have both trines superimposed on each other, like the Star of David, for instance. That's really what a sextile represents, is this two intentional merging of opposite elements, which is, fire and water, for instance. So there's half of that, but it's subtle. And so it'll make all these very subtle connections to all this Capricorn energy. But what it will do that's more obvious tomorrow as we go through it. And so let's see, on the first of, the first thing you're going to see is a square to Neptune, right? There's that square to Neptune where the meaning of things and what the potential of where we could get to is easily attainable, and we can imitate those things in order to create them for ourselves. So the Sabian symbol of 21 degrees of Sagittarius is, let's see here, it's a child and a dog wearing, like somebody's glasses, right? It's the idea that we can anticipate what we're going to grow into based on these abstractions, based on understanding the big picture, right? And we can anticipate where we're going as a result of that. There's a lot of this type of these references in Sagittarius, because when you understand the big picture, then you can anticipate where things are going to go. And that's where 21 degrees Sagittarius is this very like make-believe, imitating through play. Or you can even take it a step further and think about it as like the shaman puts on the mask of the particular deity or entity or being that it wants to evoke. And then for all intents and purposes, it becomes that deity in the course of it, the ritual or the ceremony. It's the idea that if you put on if you utilize all of the accessories and the particular things that show you that, the essence of that symbol or that archetype, right? All of the different things you put on the hat, you put on the glasses, you put on, the mask, whatever. But with Neptune, it's full experience. It's fully submerged experience. And it's very much about trust, and trusting in yourself, and trusting that there is some sort of guardianship that is there for our best interest, and to really to be able to in a tactile way almost, or in your own body and in your own knowing, and trust, to surrender to what is coming in terms of newness and freshness, right? The end of Pisces moves into Aries, which is the beginning, right? It's the seed point. So the difficult aspect about this square, and it's been this case every time Mercury, Venus, and the sun, and soon it will be Mars, has passed over this point, and the moon has done it already once before, last month for sure, in this particular degree. And now that Neptune's direct, it's even more, confusing. It's even more nebulous and fluid, and anything can be anything else, right? It's just become that much more difficult and confusing to know who is actually here for our best good, who is just a guardian for their own sake, right? Do I even know can I even trust this situation? You have to really learn to be like a child and at the same time be like a master. This is a very difficult position to be in. And so when we are feeling like, okay, if I just put on all of the accessories of this abstract that I want to grow into, then for all intents and purposes, I will be that thing. And the square to Neptune and Pisces in particular, Sagittarius to Pisces, is the higher mind of understanding, but Pisces is about full experience. And this is going to be very difficult coming into the first. You can see it 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be right at midnight on the West Coast of the United States, the square. And I think it's going to be a real test, right? And we're going to feel the tension within ourselves versus the full experience of being here and what that actually means. And I feel like that this particular transit of 20 to 21 degrees Sag squaring Neptune over and over and over again has been one of the most difficult, I think, because we so badly want to believe that we can grow into what we anticipate. And it's not that we can't. It's just the challenge to Neptune and Pisces is the challenge of everything that's coming into contact with Neptune and Pisces, which is, I'm going to touch that and it's all going to be dissolved. Like there's no boundaries. And without boundaries, then there's no distinction. And without distinction, you can't synthesize anything, right? So I hope that makes sense, that there is no up or down or, in or out with Pisces. It just is. You're just immersed in the experience of oneness. And so no matter how much we feel in that moment, we will feel and we have been, the tension of it being a fully immersed spiritual experience rather than a dogmatic experience. And that has been one of the hardest, I think, over the last month or so, longer than that, even since the sun was in Sagittarius. I think that it's been a wake-up call, to be perfectly honest. And so right on the first, of 2022, we're going to get that wake-up call right again, but it's going to be a little bit more subtle this time. It'll be right in our feelings. And some people, it'll blow right by them and they won't even know what's happening. So let's see here. Let's make sure we're on the right day for our transit. So past that, though, we see that the sun is about to come into a trine with Uranus. Now, this is actually pretty awesome. This is a Lyran starseed marking, right? We've talked about this already. So the sun is activating the Lyran starseeds in a trine to Uranus. That's pretty good. It's not exactly a stabilization necessarily, but what we're going to find is that our own voice and our authenticity and the realm in which we truly express ourselves, which is the sun, it's very powerful here in Capricorn. I mean, that's truly what Capricorn and the sun in Capricorn is power. And this is the power of our own voice and our own expression, authentic expression, in relationship to nature. We can create beautiful things. We really can, and especially if we're finding our voice through this very powerful, very ambitious, and very how do I put this? It's the Lyran starseeds don't back down, right? They know exactly what it takes to do things and to accomplish things. And so and sometimes you have to think in the long term, right? And we can cooperate with nature and create beautiful things and elegant things. You know what I mean? These, anything. That's part of the Capricornian aspect. We're contributing to creating something. And but part of that is capitalizing on our skill, on the opportunity, right? Our resources. Capricorn is all about capitalizing on things, right? This is about taking what is and creating something that has more value or worth or, well, yeah. I mean, it's coming together as a whole and being able to create something more than that. And that's what the power comes from that. in Capricorn. And so this, with the sun here, I mean, we're finding our voice through this very strong and very powerful position that's, I think it's actually stabilizing us in the midst of the destabilization of Uranus in Taurus. And so I think that we actually are going to find, some pathways be illuminated that we never really considered before, or innovation that we had not considered before, that all of a sudden is going to kind of be like a light bulb coming on. We may find that when we identify ourselves, when we find our authentic voice through this sense of capitalizing on our skill and opportunity together to create something beautiful, it actually will help stabilize us in the midst of, like I said, the shifting landscape in the actual resources themselves. And perhaps, just maybe, the shifting landscape in the resources is what opens a doorway into some sort of illuminating awareness about, oh, that is in itself an opportunity to capitalize on. When things are shifting, when they are moving or turning sideways, you see them from a new perspective and you're like, oh, I never even considered that before. And that's how you innovate, right? You're willing to think outside of the box. And in this case, it is going to be a very strong experience. So even though the moon in square to Neptune right before it is its own beast in some ways, it's going to be this trine between the sun and Uranus that is actually going to be so powerful right after it. It's allow us to see the shifting in the landscape as an opportunity to capitalize on and to practice. I would say to be able to practice cultivating and caring for the medium of our growth. If we want to grow beautiful consciousness, we actually have to nurture and take care of all of the elements that would allow for that to happen. And I think it's easy to get distracted when, everything is shifting all the time, but there's something very powerful about the sun here in Capricorn in this Lyran starseed position that is going to, we all have the opportunity to find our voice and our authentic expression through a very powerful set of skills and a powerful knowing that we can cooperate with nature rather than fight it. This is very important. Because I think that the moon and the Neptune square are very disempowering, or certainly can be very illusory if we are not aware of what it may represent. Even if we are aware, it could still feel like you're still losing yourself or any ability to actually align with meaning and value of what we're here and to do together, right? And thinking we understand something and realizing that maybe we don't. So, but it's going to be this trine that is going to help strangely enough, as trine with Uranus, stabilize us to have us really find our true power through our voice and our creative expression together. So, let's see here. Excellent. So while that is happening, then we see that you're not going to see it on here, but Black Moon Lilith is going to come in, is in Cancer, and she's going to come into a trine with Jupiter right after that. And this is, where are we here? This is a radical, 0 degrees Cancer is a radical reorientation, right? You are taking down an old flag and raising a new one. And when you do that, you are basically, it's a point of no return, right? You are setting your roots down. You are making a very clear indication of where you belong and a radical change of allegiance that becomes exteriorized in some sort of symbolic act. And that is why it's a point of no return. Right? You can't just go back and be like, I was just kidding when I put up that new flag. But the good thing about this is that it allows each of us to act as an individual who selects our life goals and, where our allegiances are. And it really has a lot to do with where the root system actually stabilizes us. Now, with Black Moon Lilith and her being retrograde right now, we have to be very mindful because we have to live with the consequences of that point of no return. And Lilith will be heard no matter what. And Lilith will be heard even if she is doing doing things that are potentially against her own self-interest, because she demands to be heard, she demands to be acknowledged, and these are primal energies. These are primal energies of self-preservation that Black Moon Lilith represents. It's deeper than our own subconscious. It's connecting to some sort of planetary, divine feminine energy that is beyond us. She represents like the essence of the divine feminine that can be discarded very easily, and especially by humanity. And so, and also too within our own self, right? These are aspects of ourself that are stigmatized. And I just talked about this earlier, didn't I? And we need to not allow ourselves to be stigmatized just by having feelings that, we've been taught to believe, or somehow, they can be self-destructive, and we can sabotage ourselves by continuing to feed certain feelings. But our feelings are they're a guidepost. They allow us to know that something is out of balance. And so rather than push them away because of the stigma, which is what people do with Black Moon Lilith, especially in a retrograde, my gosh, we want to acknowledge it, we want to honor it, we want to love it, and we want to realize that there's a reason that this is coming up, and not to push it away because we're embarrassed or ashamed of our own primal urges. But we have to be, again, we make a decision here based on this primal urge of self-preservation. This is very interesting territory here that we have to live. We absolutely are going to have to live with the consequences, because number one, it's a point of no return. Number two, a trine to Jupiter at the 0 degrees of Pisces it's brought out for everybody to see, into the marketplace, right? There's that trine, and it'll be something that we engage with personally and emotionally, and in our feelings and in our spirit, right? That's a big part of it, in our spirit. And so we have to live with those consequences. We have to live with the decision that comes out of Black Moon Lilith in a trine to Jupiter. And it will either way you look at it, it's going to be brought to market. And so it really, again, depends on what we are, giving our allegiance to in that moment, and why, that is going to have an impact on the way that it interacts with Jupiter, right? It's going to expand it into, you know what I mean? It's going to expand it into the full experience regardless, because that's what Jupiter does. But how we personally feel about that, how that influences us individually and in our own lives, is going to be something that maybe comes out a little later. This particular trine is just the foundation for the point of no return, based on our own primal needs coming up to the surface, and Jupiter being like, here, I'm just going to make it available for everybody, right? And so as long as you know where that's coming from for you, then you are comfortable with it being spread throughout the entire collective. But if you're not, it's still going to be, and there's no going back from that. I think this is an interesting marker, to be perfectly honest. For the first day of 2022, it's with the Sun trine Uranus. This is pretty powerful. Now, the Moon will move into Capricorn as well by the end of today. So it's going to cross the galactic center right here on noon on the 1st of January. Eastern Standard Time is then going to, transit the rest of Sagittarius throughout the day, and then comes to the top of the chart, the 0 degrees of Capricorn, here at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So either late afternoon, evening, late evening, depending on where you are, the Moon moves into Capricorn, and it becomes a much more serious tone, and much more focused on the actual physical there's more responsibility here with the moon in Capricorn. There's more seriousness. There's more of a focus on how our feelings are going to necessarily impact everybody else, or how our feelings contribute to a larger whole. But also, real simply, just, a moon in Capricorn is that we just are taking things so seriously, emotionally. And the first thing that's going to happen on the first when this happens is, you can see right here, comes into a sextile with Jupiter in Pisces again. So now we have the opposite point of where Lilith was, the direct opposite. If 0 degrees Cancer is the nadir and where you're drawing your personal power from, then the moon at the top of the chart is where we release this power and where we gather our own institutional power. This first degree, let's go back a minute here, and coming into a sextile with Jupiter on the opposite end is going to be a little bit more accessible to us, I think, because it's the moon and not Black Moon Lilith. It's going to be each of our individual internal landscape, how we feel, maybe our subconscious, but Lilith is something much deeper. It's a connection to something more than just ourselves that comes up from under the surface. But the moon in particular is going to be more personalized experience for all of us. And the first degree of Capricorn is again demanding power, an Indian chief demanding recognition. So just take that loosely, please. Remember that these symbols were intuited and written down in the very early 20th century. So the cultural references and the way that they conceptualize things was, it's dated. So, but the idea here is that it's power. So we're going to feel power, right? We're going to feel and almost demand power emotionally, right? We're going to recognize our inherent capacity to step into a position of power within ourselves, within our own emotions. And again, it's going to sextile Jupiter. So not a trine. This will require that we participate in some way. So this is way more about us taking responsibility for our power. And when we do that at 0 degrees of Pisces, this is a moment of activation. This is a moment where we can harmonize as a result of our investment into, and it does require, like I said, more responsibility, a sense of seriousness to a certain extent, and just realizing what it means to, with great power comes great responsibility. When you have Lilith down here in Cancer, she is, she's putting her foot down and she's raising the flag and she's making it pretty clear where she is, where she is aligned and the decisions that she's making. And this represents that primal aspect of ourself. But with the moon in Capricorn, it's way more about, we gather our power because we are recognized by those that we are part of as powerful. And this will require that we invest that into our true inner vision. If we want this true inner vision, if we want spiritual expansion with Jupiter and Pisces, right? If the Hierophant is truly what we're after in terms of wisdom and knowledge and getting to this wisdom and knowledge through our own study, we have to actually take responsibility for that. And that's going to be a very powerful, I think this is going to be a very interesting dynamic going on with the moon in Cap, Black Moon Lilith in Cancer, and Jupiter in Pisces. Very, very powerful here on the first day of 2022. And then right after that, the moon comes into a quincunx, you can see, with Rahu as well. And we also, there's the other side of our ability to harness power or demand recognition as a leader, for instance. The contrast to that is that if we use that power and if we use that leadership and we use the resources that are gathered from a collective effort, which is what Capricorn represents, if we abuse that power and abuse those resources and we try to keep power by utilizing some sort of violence, right, or going to war, that we will waste those resources. That is the contrast about having power, is that you will feel inclined to want to protect it or to keep it, and that may inadvertently lead to a release of the resources that you're trying to harness in the first place by consolidating a group into a singular organism, right, that has security and that has a sense of provision and protection for everyone. But the contrast to that is that there will be a feeling of needing to secure this, and you'll have to utilize and waste the capitalized resources in order to do that. And the quincunx with her own north node and the north node. Sorry, guys. The north node is that. There may very well, we just have to adjust ourselves, our expectations in this moment, because our soul's journey is still having us be very open to the receiving of the blessings, receiving of the information or the data or the communication that we are open to as a result of having a conscious awareness to begin with, right? And so we're waiting for the reception of those blessings or that information and staying open to it, whereas we are maybe feeling like it's very possible that part of what we receive as a result of our journey here and our exploration, and especially at the closer the North Node gets to Alcyon, the more intensely visible and available the full range of experience is going to be from perspective. But we just have to make sure that I think the adjustment is going to come here, because what we receive, what we see, what is given to us, which is the direction that we're headed, right, in order to grow, is to be open, that we have to be, I would say that part of this is being open to whatever ideas come across. And sometimes I think that may actually trigger a sense of wanting to protect it, or a sense of wanting to, protect one's authority. And we'll have to adjust ourselves in that moment too by the end of the first, okay? And then we come into Sunday, which is our new moon, right? The 2nd of January is our new moon. And let it burn, baby. So let's talk about it and look at when it's going to happen. So it's going to be in the afternoon on Sunday, East Coast time. So we're looking at roughly like 2, I wish it would just go 1 hour. Yeah. So we're looking at around 2 p.m. on Sunday, Eastern time, that we have our new moon. Let it burn, right? I'll read you the Sabian symbol so that you really understand where that comes from. The Sabian symbol is a fire worshiper meditates on the ultimate realities of existence. So it's a very subjective quest, right? We're looking for something beyond the interplay of life and death through our meditation, through the reverence and the acknowledgement of fire, to really gaze upon fire and use it as a symbolic reference. So the mystery of fire is the mystery of all transformations, right? That are wrapped up in that whole death and rebirth cycle. And so it's really simply just magic, right? In the idea that you can experience death on some level and return to reborn, right? I mean, magic, resurrection, however you want to look at it. This is the essence of the new moon and the beginning of 2022 with this new moon, setting, and especially the beginning in terms of setting intentions for ourselves. I'm not suggesting that you worship fire. That's up to you. What I'm suggesting here is that if we set intentions for our own personal growth over the next month to involve and to embody this reverence for the purification of fire and what it represents, which is being able to transcend the the process of death and rebirth. I'm not talking literally, although that is kind of what the story of Christ in particular represents, is that he died and was resurrected, and back into the same body, essentially. I mean, it was his etheric body, but the idea is that his actual body was gone too. So, but it's about growing individually through how we feel and then how we express ourselves or act on the outside. We want to bring these two aspects together and ignite them or activate them in some way. And letting it burn is, imagine if everybody was able to let themselves be like a flame or a candle. We would just light up the world. And that's really what we're going for, is for everybody to turn their light on. But there has to be this burning away of something in order for that to happen. And this is the intention that we can set for ourselves over the course of the month. And as we go through, the weeklies and the dailies and the Pleiadian revival report that's coming, we'll get a lot more idea of what to expect over the course of the month. But this is where it starts with the new moon, is this letting it burn. So what else is going on? So Mercury comes into Aquarius as well on this day, as you see, 0 degrees Aquarius. This is an important degree, right? This is an important degree that has to do with the ideal and enduring character of the human achievements, right? You have a great vision, you have an idealized vision for humanity, and this particular degree is the essence of Aquarius, which is the power that is inherent in all of our great human works and projects that is meant to endure far beyond our own personal lifespan. So Mercury coming into an air sign is pretty favorable. Of course, it's going to go retrograde in Aquarius, but the thought processes that we're all engaged in are going to start really being much more about the durability of humanity as a whole. And the durability of humanity is not necessarily on its institutions, but more of the spiritual connection that we all have together. So Mercury coming into Aquarius is really going to start, our minds are really going to be shifting into thinking and considering and conceptualizing the spiritual nature of humanity and the power that's inherent in everything that we do, as opposed to the actual physical representations and material institutions that ultimately are just falling away anyway. So we want to start thinking about the Aquarian nature. And of course, Saturn has been here for a little while now. So we've had, at least we've had a foot or more, right? We've had some sort of basic structure here that has anchored us into a sense of reality with Aquarius. And then with Mercury here, it's going to be a much more of a mental journey through what it is what's the power inherent in what we are creating together as a species and as a human collective. Let's see what else is happening. So Mars has moved past the point of the solar eclipse at this point, and is soon to be moving into the second decan, the second half of Sagittarius. And now Saturn has moved into the next degree of Aquarius. Now this is getting interesting, because we then time and the authority and the structure of reality is in itself a barometer, right, of what is likely to happen. And it's a causal relationship. When you have a barometer, it measures changes in pressure. Changes in pressure, like air pressure, is how meteorologists are able to forecast. And so with Saturn there, it's such a strong and stable and unyielding type of tool, that the collective in general is the tool, is the barometer. And so we can anticipate things, we can plan for the future, because the potential already exists at the core. And again, Saturn is unyielding. And so there's going to be a very strong experience, I think, moving forward, of really now being able to see the writing on the wall. Natural laws, which involve causal relationships, are going to become very obvious and unyielding as Saturn is unyielding. So, but it also is going to give us the backbone to really discover basic natural facts that allow us to plan in advance for action. There's no more, I mean, and of course with Jupiter and Pisces, the expansion into the realm of infinity in terms of all kinds of experiences, information, propaganda, spiritualization, all of that stuff in Pisces, it's everything. That's going to, the expansion into that realm is going to make it more confusing. But Saturn in this particular degree of Aquarius is like, you know what? There's no, like, if you're paying attention, there are natural laws that involve causal relationships, and cause and effect is going to be something that is very easily measured at this point. Okay, so that's a big part of the second as well. So we have the new moon. We have there's a lot of transitions is happening. With the new moon, we have Mercury that moves into Aquarius, and we have Saturn that has shifted into the next degree of Aquarius. So when we're looking at the moon transits through Capricorn during this time, we're going to see some things that have already come up, right? Because everything else is in Capricorn right now. So first off is, before we even get to the new moon, we go back a couple hours and we see, again, the moon in a square to Chiron. This is about being in attunement to what rhythm, what frequency band are you in tune to? So we've gone over this many, many times, and because there has been many squares to Chiron here. Giving us opportunities to experience mentally, and certainly with the sun through our own expression and our own illumination to what it feels like when, depending on what frequency band we're aligned with socially and institutionally, that is going to challenge our ability to see and the big picture and the full picture of who we can be as subjective individuals, right? Because it is individuals that make up the Capricorn matrix, right? There is no society without individual people making up the society. So we're still working with Chiron and Aries, and so now that the moon is making this connection, it's a subtle kind of like following up the last time, really, of reminding ourselves at a intuitive level and maybe subconscious level. Perhaps depending on where you are, you may find this coming up through obviously your emotions, but also, or your intuition, but also during your dream state. Again, which frequency band are you aligned with in your energy? How is that going to impact your feelings of shame and guilt and the identity that has been imposed upon all of us to feel ashamed and guilty about who we are? This is going to be one last kind of like follow-up of like feeling it in your body. Which frequency band are you aligned with? The structures that are being destroyed, the false structure that is overlay to keep us from actually knowing what's natural law unfolding. All of those things are opportunities to align with and feel how it brings out all of this inner child wounding and shame, because that's all it's going to do. But this is, like I said, this is going to kind of be this last follow-up here before it happens. So remember that come into Sunday morning, because how you're feeling at that moment, right? Pay attention. Pay attention to what your resonance is, how it feels, how it's bringing out all of these feelings related to Chiron, because that's what you want to throw into the fire and burn away and allow to transmute when the moon comes into conjunction with the sun. So that's an important square, the moon squaring Chiron. And then the moon comes around and does the same thing that the sun just did the day before, which is come into a trine with Uranus. So same thing. This is a Lyran marking. And so while the sun was illuminating this trine, right, our voice and our expression and our authenticity and our action, even to a certain extent, findings, stabilizing what is often a shifting and unstable landscape. The same thing with the moon at this point is going to trine Uranus as well. And so it'll be a little bit more subtle. It'll be more about how we feel about it as opposed to what we're expressing ourselves about it. But it's going to be kind of the same idea that we can cooperate with nature. We can cooperate with the natural law and create things that are beautiful, and as long as we're capitalizing on our own skill and opportunity. So again, the moon is doing all this kind of like follow-up in Capricorn right before the new moon. I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity here to, tie up some loose ends and to, check back in with certain things before we throw shit into the fire, right? And then after that is that Uranus trine. This is where it comes into the new moon. This is like I said, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday the 2nd. And then Mercury actually comes into a trine with Rahu by the end of the day on Sunday, as you can see. And this is an unexpected thunderstorm, right? The 2nd degree of Aquarius is very much about the need. It's very clear. The need to develop inner security, which will enable us to meet unexpected crisis, right? The idea of Aquarius is that it is humanity built. It is the spiritual energy that is pervasive through our connection to each other. But that doesn't mean that nature is not going to have an impact on us. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Part of that is being in tune with nature enough to realize that nature is merciless and that there are unexpected things that happen, and the inner security comes from our connection to each other. And so Mercury will come across this point and then come into a trine with the North Node. Be ready for a mental crisis or some sort of unexpected mental storm that is really actually taking us exactly where we need to go at a soul level. It is propelling us towards our destiny at a soul level. It's just unexpected. And if anything, it's going to provide the impetus or the foundation for our mental security in the face of something very unexpected. So, I mean, it's almost like the storm is that flash of lightning that's going to start the fire, right? The fire that we are meant to worship in some ways, and take that loosely, worship, to revere and to honor and to respect for what it actually represents. So Mercury comes into a trine with Rahu, and it's the unexpected storm, right? And there's a bolt of lightning coming off of Jupiter's eagle. Aquila comes off of Aquila, and Jupiter, had been just throwing those thunderbolts, but now it's like the mind is going to throw those thunderbolts. Maybe we're going to have some massive wake-up call mentally or in some sort of communication that's absolutely taking us exactly where we need to go, but is going to be so unexpected and so crisis-oriented that that it may actually start the very fire that we are meant to be revering and respecting. So by the end of Sunday, it's going to be a crazy weekend, I think. And of course, a big part of it is because we're moving into 2022, but these astrological aspects are pretty important when it comes to major transition right now. It's very concentrated, it feels like. So I want to just, the week doesn't have a lot of these like crazy transits. If we go through it, the first thing that I see on the 3rd here, guys, is that, Jupiter is going to come into the 2nd degree of Pisces and square the nodes. So Jupiter will be in a T-square with the nodal axis at this point. And again, if you remember the movie, I've been thinking about this particular transit a lot. And if you remember the Clash of the Titans movie, and this is actually something that is brought up in multiple stories, in multiple narratives. You can see it in a few different ones, but I'll use Clash of the Titans because it references these archetypes directly. Is that at the when Perseus ends up magically gets taken somewhere else, because in order to test him, he is given all these gifts. And one of the things that he's given is a helmet that makes him invisible. Well, the 2nd degree of Pisces is very much about being very cautious and knowing that when everything is submerged into everything else, that there are elements out there that want to harvest you, right? It's about a squirrel hiding from the hunters. You want to be able to gather all of your resources, but you also don't want to make yourself known to predators. And there is something it's a T-square with the nodes, right? Because the North Node is having our minds stay open, right? And so, but Jupiter in some ways is potentially giving us the tools or the gifts or bestowing his good graces on us in a way to keep us shielded or secure and safe in the midst of our soul being very open and our consciousness being very open in order for our soul to grow. I think that's very interesting. Like, I get this, and again, it's a T-square. So Jupiter again is the point where the oppositional energy is harnessed the most. It's how you find the fulcrum is in the square to both of these places. And this, I mean, it's the same thing in Harry Potter, right? Dumbledore, well, it wasn't Dumbledore. So I forget exactly who, but Dumbledore is definitely Jupiter, okay, in a lot of ways, in terms of what it represents. So again, the invisibility cloak that Harry Potter gets, right? It allows him to be invisible and to hide from those who would try to hurt him or take him or whatever, in the midst of being fully spiritually and magically immersed in everything else. And so there is right as we come over into Monday, there is some sort of gift or bestowment that ultimately allows us to hide if we need to, or at least be hidden within the soup of the morphogenic field while still at a soul level being open in our consciousness to receive that which we each individually are looking to receive. That's the thing about Gemini, right? It's the function of the individual mind. I think that's a very interesting T-square right away. I don't know how, what that's going to look like, and maybe it's just, lay low, right, for a minute and not get too engaged in what's happening out there, as opposed to laying low, not being too obvious, but still paying very close attention to where we've been and where we're going. The moon will also come into Aquarius, this week. And so that means it's going to meet Mercury, it's going to meet Saturn. And so there'll be very personalized connections to both of these planets in terms of where they're at in Aquarius, right? And so these are opportunities to feel into these energies that are normally expressing themselves through different areas, right? Mercury is the function of our mind and our nervous system. Saturn is the, paternal father figure, or Kronos, or, the Lord of Time, right? The unyielding Lord of Time, the leader, right? Power. Saturn represents power. And so the moon will make connections to both of these throughout the week and allow us each a personalized connection to what they represent. And we'll go into all of those as we go through the dailies. Of course, Venus in her retrograde look is going to come back and sextile Neptune again. Now she's in retrograde, and is the value of the relay race is something that I think we're really going to take stock of. That it's the dynamic interchange that within our own groups or our own society that is where we gather our most power. But we need something outside of us that motivates us all to cooperate together. We're going to be really taking an inventory of this and the value of this and the people in our lives, the projects in our lives, what has worth to us at a social level, that we are we running ourselves ragged, right? Are we running a relay race that's actually going nowhere? Are there even any other competitors? Or are we, or maybe we want to switch teams. Maybe we want to train some more. There's going to be a lot of ways that this inventory of the relay race, right? Working together in competition to something outside of us. But the sextile to Neptune, again, it's going to be very important that we take stock of this and to maybe take some time to reevaluate the meaning and the value of these types of relationships and interactions and even situations, because, again, we want to make sure that we are fully able to surrender and trust. And I think that there's something about this sextile that's going to give us a sense of what, who we want to actually be involved with and what type of race we want to be running. And when we do that, then the sextile, or the investment that makes into our full-on surrender to what, to the will of source or to God or the Great Spirit, and trusting and being able to see truly who is in guardianship to us and watching over us versus maybe some aspect that we think, and that's what the false light would be considered, right? That it seems like that our best interests are being attended to, but really it's because of what we have to offer to them. Again, the Jupiter at 2 degrees of Pisces is instrumental in this, right? Of bestowing some measure of cautionary equipment to us, or whatever, whatever Jupiter, however that comes, and that's going to be a function of where this is all at in your chart as well. But this sextile, this is on the 5th, right? So as we move through the week, we're also going to see that the moon comes into Pisces as well, and that means that the moon's going to meet Jupiter and the moon's going to meet Neptune. And so this is going to be incredibly intuitive, incredibly empathic, right? We're going to have incredibly revelatory dreams, right? Revelation all over the place with the moon in Pisces, and just feeling so empathic and so much compassion for people, and also feeling all of the disempowerment, maybe feeling or getting caught up in the propaganda, maybe getting caught up in escapism, all of these things with the moon in Pisces. It's going to be very strong. And as we come into Friday, it's the moon's just going to be moving through Pisces, and there's not a ton of really large transits. I mean, we'll see that the moon comes into a square actually with Mars still in Sagittarius, and it's getting very close to its own square with Neptune as well. So that's something to consider for the next week or the next lunar quarter. But it's really not until we get to the 8th, which is when Venus and the Sun conjunct. And this is going to be a very, I think we're going to really come to an awareness of the value of stepping up and starting to take some real responsibility, maybe before we're ready, but we will find ourselves through this. And this is very important because this is very close to where Venus and Mars come into a conjunction in February. So this particular conjunction is wonderful. I mean, Venus is retrograde, so it's going to still be much more of an internalized, introspective experience. But this is really about finding ourselves through stepping into a role of responsibility. We might not even feel ready for it yet, and that's okay. But we're going to kind of have to. That's what I feel like is going to happen at this point. You can see that Pluto has moved into a new degree of Capricorn, so we'll be talking about that as well. You can see that the moon comes into Aries. It's going to meet Chiron. It's going to then square the sun in the first quarter square, right? And this is going to be a lot, again, about our own individual feelings of compassion and wanting to help people, and how that relates to us, how we feel about ourselves doing these things in a square to a crisis in action with what we do or say in terms of the collective. And, the moon will also square Venus before that happens at the same degree that it just conjunct the sun the day before. So there will be a lot of interesting friction here between like how we feel about ourselves and who we are and who we can be versus a lot of energy that's still situated in the institutional structures and our responsibility to them by the time we get to the end of this lunar week. So we'll talk a lot more about this stuff as it gets closer to the weekend, and I'll be putting out the astrology forecast for all the signs, because that's going to be then the quarter that leads up to the full moon on the 17th, right? We have a full moon, Capricorn, Cancer, right? The moon will be opposite Pluto as well. So again, there's some serious storm raging here within each of us emotionally that's going to get brought right up with this full moon in January. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So that's a lot of information. And and I really value you so much, and I appreciate you being here. So I'm going to leave it there for the weekend and for the and in anticipation of the new calendar year of 2022, may it be so much better. May it be so much better than 2021. But part of that is really setting some intention around, revering and respecting and honoring the process of purification and the enigma that life and death represents to us, all wrapped up in one little neat package of fire. I think that there's something so important about this aspect of fire. And of course, this was the whole theme of the emergence readings, the eclipse readings, and this whole period of time, is that we have to burn down in order to rise as the phoenix. And with the Pluto return of the United States during this time period, among a lot of other things, it's certainly going to be a very turbulent time for many, many people. And I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. The whole point of this is to be realistic and to maintain our optimism and realism in the face of what will likely be some very challenging situations, because we are not all on the same page. And if Saturn has taught us anything in the last couple weeks, that is definitely where things are. We are not all on the same page, and maybe eventually we will get there, but we may not be on the same page. We may not even be on the same evolutionary trajectory, but we're still all going to the same place together. And it's important to realize that as we continue to go up this escalator. And I think that we can save ourselves a lot of frustration and heartache, and really give ourselves, just take it easy on ourselves when we realize this. So my friends, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Gift exchange is still open until the new moon officially. So if you submit your review, even if you haven't had a service with me before, if you are a regular viewer on BitChute or YouTube and you really just value this work, you can leave a review about that, and I'll then we can do the gift exchange, and I will offer you a free micro reading or an energy work session in exchange. Word of mouth is probably the most valuable asset or currency for any small business, especially something as niche as what I'm doing. So your honest and authentic feedback, it means so much, and I want to acknowledge that by giving, especially with the new moon right here in the new year, what a great time to just get a check-in and an energetic tune-up. So if you're not on Facebook or Telegram following me there, you can always get on my email list. That is accessible through the website. You just go to the website and splash page pops up. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great New Year's. Please be safe. Take care of yourselves. Have fun. Most importantly, have fun. Enjoy yourselves. Really take the time to acknowledge and value the people that mean things to you, that have meaning to you in your life and your relationships. And I'll see you on the other side. Let's check in on Monday after the new moon, and we will go from there. I love you guys. Thank you. Have a blessed weekend. Have a great New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and a great weekend, great new moon, all of those things. And we will be together on Monday for the Daily Medicine transmission. Bye, everyone. Let's see here. Oh, gosh. Okay. Bye.